sister's a therapist and I tell jokes. We both want to help all kinds of folks.
Hello, and welcome to My Sister's a Therapist. My name is Virginia Jones. I'm a stand-up comedian, but my sister's a therapist.
Hi, I'm Laura Ryan. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist and sister to modern-day jester Virginia Jones.
Modern-day jester, telling truth to power, the philosopher clown.
Wearing bells on her hat.
That's right. The Shakespearean ideal of modern fool. I think that I fulfill that pretty well.
I had some real life feedback from a listener yesterday. She had just listened to the white culture episode and she said, well, thanks for making me feel bad about being white.
I got some feedback from an Irish listener because the episode was white culture. Laura swiftly realized you cannot say white culture on TikTok.
They ban you immediately.
TikTok get very angry because they assume that you're a white supremacist, and I guess why not?
Well, and I even spelled it the way they like to spell it on TikTok, WYT, and that still wasn't good enough.
Not good enough. So Laura decided to call it Mayo culture, and I thought that was a lot funnier. One of our listeners from Ireland said, well, you know, Mayo culture.
Oh, yeah, the place, County Mayo.
County Mayo, like that is a real place. I'm like, yeah, we weren't thinking about that, but
let's be real, though. Let's be 100%. County Mayo is about as white as you get.
Yeah, it doesn't get any whiter.
So it still tracks. It still works.
According to Ancestry.com, my DNA test, County Mayo is where most of our family is from. So,
well, it's also where my boyfriend, Garen Noon, is from. He's delicious.
He certainly is. And he has a lot to say about County Mayo men.
He has a lot to say about Irish flirtation, which I find hilarious because it's very similar to English flirtation in my experience.
You're not the worst looking woman in the world.
You look like you got a strong back.
Thanks a lot. Speaking of men and women, our topic this week is fatphobia.
This is a classic.
This is something I think we've talked about between the two of us at least once a week for our whole adult lives.
Yes. You know that this week I had an experience with fatphobia on TikTok.
That's true. Laura got a comment not in response to a video she had made, but in response to a comment she made on someone else's account.
Right. So there was a guy who was making fun of Americans, which I'm always game for. And he was saying, this is what Americans think British people are doing all the time. And one of the things he was doing was basically every 10 minutes, he was pouring himself a cup of tea. And I said, the tea part is true, though. They think you wear knickerbockers and you wear a bowler hat and you're always riding the train. You're on double-decker buses every 10 minutes. You have a handlebar mustache. So I said, the tea part is true, though. And then I got a helpful comment from a man named Har.
Mm-hmm. Hello, Har.
Har used a photo of Kanye West made to look obese, which was interesting. So Har said, I can't even look at it without laughing. Go on a diet, you lard of... I was thinking I might get a t-shirt that just says lard of fat.
Well, I appreciate that Har has battled through the challenges of not speaking English to let you know you're a POS sack of lard.
I was wondering to myself, what even is an lard of fat? An lard of fat?
What's funny is item one, you really went out there by saying the British drink tea. I can see why that's like a really fiery opinion.
It's a hot topic, and it could be really offensive to a lot of people. So I get it.
He wasn't responding to your avatar, which does not show your body. He saw your comment, became incensed that you said that British people drink tea, went to your page, watched a video, and came back to say that you were an lard of fat.
I mean, there was a lot of effort.
We frequently start with definitions. The definition of fatphobia is the irrational fear of, aversion to, or discrimination against obesity or people with obesity. Now, homophobia is not really fear.
I think it sometimes is.
It's rooted in fear, but it comes across as dislike.
Right. Disdain,
social stigma. But people really hate and fear being fat. So much so that there was a study in 2006 at Yale that found that 46% of people studied would rather give up a year of their life rather than be obese.
I mean, that tracks.
and that 15% of people, 1/5, were willing to shave 10 years off of their life. So dying at 60 if they could die thin.
That's not surprising to me at all, just based on everything I know about my personal and professional life.
Not going to tell tales out of school. Laura and I have been fat for most of the time.
I've always felt like I was fat. I don't know if I was the definition of fat. I don't think I even felt thin as a child. I just felt like a person. I have not felt an acceptable weight since I was probably 12, 13, something like that.
I have yo-yoed quite a bit in my life. And one of the real good features is that when you lose a bunch of weight, your friends and family will talk about how gross you were before.
It's not a bug, it's a feature.
After the second or third time that I lost a bunch of weight, I had to tell people, please don't talk about that fat girl because she was me then.
She's still me. I'm still her.
Me. And also, she's going to be back.
This is a reprieve, but she's coming back. That's how this works.
Yeah, she's coming back better than ever before, really.
I mean, she'll probably be fatter than ever before. That's usually how that works. When I lose an extreme amount of weight and then bring some back, it's always more than what I had.
More than what you put down in the first place. I have a joke about fatphobia in my act that I have been telling, and right now it's in a shape where I really, really like it. It's about the absurdity that the person who is most unhappy about my fatness is my mother.
When she herself is a fat and had a baby with another fat.
With another fat, exactly.
And their parents were also fats.
It's not a coincidence. It's a causal effect.
Again, it's not a bug. It's a feature.
But at the end of the joke, I have started saying, I try to like myself no matter what weight I am, but it's hard because I know that other people don't.
And then the room goes
quiet, absolutely silent, pin drop silence. I mean, this is a truth. You guys are not laughing because it's true, but how absurd that it's true.
Because this person's body formation doesn't fit a standard that we made up, I have to dislike them?
Of course, the obvious thing is romantic relationships. Oh, fat people can never be in love. No one can ever love a fat person. I've been single for 45 minutes my entire life, so I don't particularly worry about that. But what you don't think about is the disdain of friends, of coworkers, of people on the street, of randos.
Well, yeah. The last time I had a big weight drop, I ran into a woman that I knew extremely casually. Like I would see her at events or whatever, but we weren't friends by any stretch. This is going to shock you. I was walking through the Target parking lot.
Moms go to Target.
Well, this mom goes a whole bunch. Again, if Target wants to give us a sponsorship, I'm down.
We're open.
My child and my money go to Target. She pulls over, rolls down her window and yells, "Wow, you have lost a lot of weight."
Thanks, man. It's knowing that someone who you don't really have a relationship with is carrying around a picture of you in their mind and concerning themselves with it.
You have enough concern about my body that you're going to park your car and roll down the window in the middle of a Target parking lot to tell me that, thank God, I'm not so fat anymore?
I have the other side of that story. A couple years ago, I had just come out of a second audition, which is known as a callback in the business. The callback had gone really well. The guy in the room really liked what I was doing. The casting director really liked what I was doing. I had good vibe with my partner. So I walked out feeling really good and booked that role. But me and the guy that I was in the audition with walked out on the street, smiling and talking about how it went. I stepped into a crosswalk and a lady, I guess, didn't want me to. And she screamed out the window at me, "F you, you fat B." Not only on my own, but got to enjoy being called that in front of a guy that I just did a scene with.
I think I love slurs when they're in front of people that maybe I'm trying to impress or something.
Like not even that, just a witness to my misery. And he was also a fat. And so we just had this moment of misery together.
So he knew.
He knew. But we do see that overweight people marry less often, have fewer career opportunities. Fatness will affect your ability to earn money, which is bizarre.
Because it's looked at as a moral failing. So if I'm morally inferior, then I don't deserve more money.
We think of fat people as lacking willpower. being lazy, being gluttonous, being stupid. Someone in our family was very surprised to know that a fat person was in fact really smart. We won't talk about who it was.
Right. He knows a lot of things. He's really smart.
When there's bad feelings about minorities, when people have opinions and stereotypes about minorities, they are minorities. They are a small segment of the population. But overweight and obese people are 2/3 of the population.
Right. But fatphobia is entrenched in racism.
I had a very sad interaction with a pharmacist recently who was filling a prescription for me and remarked that the medication that I'm on frequently leads people to lose weight. And so he was asking me about it. And I said, yes, I have been experiencing that as part of this depression med. He said, well, like, does it help a lot? I'm like, it's definitely an element with everything else. And he said, yeah, I just have to get more willpower. And it broke my heart. It wasn't appropriate for the time for me to lean over the table and say, there's no such thing as willpower.
This is literally what I say in my office once an hour. What I say is willpower is not something I can put in a bucket or a bowl. It doesn't exist. It's made up. And basically what you're saying is the way that your body works, you have sugar and fat cravings more than a naturally thin person does. That's what you're saying to me.
When people become TikTok influencers or Instagram influencers, it tends to be because they're small people and they know that they're not experiencing fat cravings, sugar cravings.
They don't have these compulsive cravings.
They're like, well, the solution is just work on not having those.
You know, I do the same thing when I see someone in a wheelchair. I go, I can walk.
Have you tried just walking?
Have you considered the possibility of just hopping out of that chair and walking a few blocks?
Let's talk about that a little bit. The advice that you get, because on the internet, off the internet, wherever I am, many people have told me it's just calories in, calories out. I used to try to do a joke about that. I'm like, oh my God, you don't just think I'm fat. You think I'm bad at math.
Well, circling back to our mom, she has this incredible ability to add up really high numbers because she's been counting her calories since she was 5.
If that were the only thing in play, no one would be fat.
This would not be an issue.
And also, if bullying people kept them from being fat, no one would be fat.
Literally, no one would be fat because every person who's fat is bullied. The first part of my career, 85 to 90% of my clientele were women trying to lose weight. It's brutal. And I think the worst part is the external bullying is part of it. It's the internal, it's the way that these women talk to themselves. It's really painful.
As we have both experienced, people who are hardest on you for being fat are fat people.
Or former fats. I haven't really been harassed by women too much about being fat, of course, apart from my mother, but I'm just thinking it's not even shaming. What I have felt most of my life when it comes to dating and even just being out in clubs around men, things like that, like bars and stuff, I'm just invisible. No one's actively rude to me. I just don't exist.
You are just not perceived. You are not interacted with. I find that the form that women interacting with me usually takes is a faux helpfulness. I had lost a bit of weight and I was walking around the Silver Lake Reservoir in LA every day. A man I did not know pulled his car over and rolled his window down and said, "Hey, I noticed you've lost a lot of weight."
What?
A man I had never spoken to in my life.
Stalker much?
And this is a change in me because 20 years ago, I would have said, "Thank you." But I said, "Please don't talk to me about my body."
You're a stranger. Why are you talking to another stranger about her body?
I used to take a spin class with a friend. I really enjoy a spin class because it's one of the exercise classes that actually teaches you a skill. You're learning how to ride a bike. She and I went every Saturday. So you got familiar with the same faces all the time. And a woman came up to us, the two of us after class and said, "I just want to let you guys know I was where you are. Keep coming back. You're going to do great. I'm so proud of you guys." And at the time, I still took that as a compliment. And my friend was like, "No, she's telling us that there's a non-fat rainbow at the end of this yellow brick road."
I wouldn't possibly just be taking a spin class so I can have cardiovascular health. And also the word healthy. I really hate that.
Oh, yeah.
I'm so triggered by that word. Yeah, we're eating healthy. Oh, you mean you're eating low carbohydrate, high protein food? Okay, got it.
But the conversations that I've had in offices, "Oh, I got this salad. I thought it was going to be healthy, but it has all this dressing on it.
Oh, God.
They wouldn't make me half a sandwich. Will someone eat the other half of this extremely normal sized sandwich?
You mean the normal portion of food you have in front of you? You can only eat half of it?
You can only eat
Interesting.
half of it. As an adult woman having a full day, there's no way you could eat the other half of this sandwich, I guess, ever. Because I've worked in fashion most of my life, I have been in extremely fat-phobic environments.
Surrounded by women with eating disorders.
Right.
I remember I had a client in the past who had a coworker, and every single day she ate a can of Heinz tomato soup for lunch.
Mm-hmm.
And she didn't eat breakfast. That was her day.
A friend of mine told me once, when I hadn't lived in LA very long, everyone here has an eating disorder and a really good justification for that eating disorder.
Absolutely. And a lot of people are saying, oh, I used to have an eating disorder. Okay, but tell your arms that. It's interesting. You're talking about plus size models and stuff. I have a tough time with plus size models because when I'm really fat, I'm like, but I don't look like that chick. And I found out recently that they're stuffing these women. They're taking a woman who's like a size 10
Right.
and just putting extra stuffing in her boobs and bottom. And they're just saying that's what that is.
My chin doesn't look like that.
Why'd she have such a thin face?
Yeah.
It's because she's not that size. And then Emily told me she was dating a man who was a photographer for Vogue. And he was saying it's very difficult because all of fashion is built around basically the male body, what a young gay man would be interested in looking at. No curves, broad shoulders, tall, thin. And so that's what women have been eating disordering their way to create.
Another way fat phobia showed up at work is we would have stuff photographed on a plus size model, and there would be notes like, can we Photoshop out these folds? And we had to explain to the design department, this is what fat people look like. You're not just solid like a Barbie doll, but bigger.
Right.
You are softer. Even a very beautiful, very fit plus size model is just more soft. And this is what clothes look like on that model.
That is what literal fat looks like.
Right. We had a piece of clothing not do very well that we thought was going to do very well. One of my designers, who I love very much, said, and we photographed it on X model's name, it would have looked better on the straight size model.
Now, different companies are using plus size models.
Mm-hmm.
I'll be looking at clothes and I'm like, I would rather pretend that I have a much smaller body. And when I buy this sweatshirt, it's going to look like that.
The relationship between women and the fashion industry is also super toxic. We're used to looking at these extremely tiny, extremely young models. And part of us likes to fantasize. That's what it's going to look like on me. Even though we've had the experience 100 times.
Right.
That's not the case.
Of being in this body.
In the 90s, which was, maybe one of the more fat-phobic times we've ever survived.
Oh, absolutely. It was
the
wild.
rise of Kate Moss and the low-rise jean. God bless us all. In the 90s, there was a push to have more plus-size models, especially on magazine covers, when magazines were still a thing that people bought and paid attention to. It was documentable, verifiable, that when you put a beautiful plus-size model on the front of a magazine, that issue would tank because fat women didn't want to buy it. We didn't want to think of ourselves that way.
Absolutely not. But also reflecting back on the 2000s fashion, and it's going to shock you, I saw TikTok. And this woman she went home to her parents' house and they still had basically a capsule collection of her 2000s clothes. And she pulled out this pair of jeans and she said, do you see that there's like a 1 inch from the top of this zipper to the bottom? No wonder my whole butt was hanging out of all of my pants.
Right. Well, and it's funny because when things like that get trendy, super low-rise jeans, super crop tops, shirts get longer. There would be layers of shirts.
Right. That was the Disney move. You wear a tank top and a long sleeve shirt and a sweater. I have a friend who's very fashion conscious, and she was telling me the new thing right now is crop top and butt cut for your hair and socks that are pulled all the way up. And I was like, can you imagine what I would look like?
You would look like someone who had escaped from a special school.
Somebody who's on the loose. She found that in a random person's backyard. Those are not her clothes.
Although you did rock the butt cut for many years with pride.
At this point, no, thank you.
So you mentioned television and performers who tearfully admit that they used to have eating disorders, but they look like people with eating disorders.
Right, exactly.
Media in general overrepresents underweight individuals and underrepresents overweight individuals. 1/3 of actresses in television are classified as underweight, while only 5% of the general pop is underweight. So here we have the phenomenon of the teeny tiny wife and the great big fat funny husband, and everybody being teeny tiny, a teeny tiny doctor, a teeny tiny nurse, a teeny tiny psychic, a teeny tiny crime fighter, everybody. And a challenge of being overweight in Hollywood is that previously, if you're overweight, there has to be a reason in the story for that.
I watched a whole show about it where a woman died and came back as a fat person. She couldn't hack it.
A study of over 1,000 TV characters in 2003 identified 14% of female characters and 24% of male characters as overweight, despite the fact that in the real world, it would be 75%. And when you do have overweight people on television, they're often doing best friend roles, bad guy roles, many times stereotyped to be unintelligent, lazy, and evil. Fat TV characters are more commonly seen eating and are less likely to be involved in romantic relationship compared to average weight television characters. In Bridgerton, the beautiful Penelope Featherington has gotten Colin Bridgerton, and people are losing their minds.
It is disgusting because this woman is gorgeous.
Yeah.
And anywhere else in the world, people would be dying to date her. And even a lot of historians have pointed out, hey, guess what?
Yeah.
Her body is the ideal of that time.
As it has been through a great deal of European history.
Right.
The actress who plays Penelope Featherington, the very beautiful Nicola Coughlan, did an interview that was very funny, where basically the interviewer was telling her that she was so brave for being partially nude on television, just so brave. And she said, yes, I represent a type of body type that is not frequently on television, which is the body type of women with perfect breasts.
Right. And she said, and I'm willing to expose them, to share this with the world. And she was so right. She does have perfect breasts. I've seen them.
But yes, just the idea that even though we see fat people in real life having relationships, having kids, to see them on television?
No way. So there was a show called Drop Dead Diva. Did you ever watch that?
No.
Okay, so the plot line is a vapid aspiring model is killed in a car crash and gets brought back to life in an intelligent, overweight lawyer, hoping to find the meaning of inner beauty. And the other thing that's hilarious to me is this overweight lawyer is the beautiful, just drop dead gorgeous Brooke Elliott playing Jane Bingham. But the whole show is her as basically this ghost of a dumb model trying to get through life as a fat woman. And she's kind of shocked because she's like, well, why aren't people doing things for me? Why is every man that I'm interested in not wanting to date me? Why has my life changed so much? And it's because she's in a fat body. And hilarity ensues, and she never gets a boyfriend.
Another analysis in 2007, 135 scenes featuring overweight individuals found that it was anti-fat humor. So either the person was doing something physical that was hilarious because they were fat.
She's out of breath. She's sweating.
Or someone was saying something fat phobic to them. It's hard. Melissa McCarthy is incredibly funny and incredibly beautiful, but has made her career on the physical humor of the fat woman and how funny it is. The absurdity of a fat woman acting in a sexy way, talking to men. Hilarious.
It's so funny. Can you imagine a fat woman thinking she's pretty like she often does in television and film? On Bridgerton, I'm a fan, so I've watched 3 seasons. And there was a woman who was doing an analysis of how many love scenes they were in seasons 1 and 2 compared to season 3. And basically, the Colin and Penelope Featherington story gets like 1/8 of the time of every other season, where it's straight size folk banging everywhere they can.
So in the midst of all this fat phobia, and we are seeing more diverse actors on television, but fat phobia is actually getting worse.
Shocker.
Self-reported incidents of weight-based discrimination have increased every year since 1995. It also affects different groups to greater extents that 80% of Black women are considered overweight or obese compared to 65% of white women. And so we can definitely say that part of what is unacceptable about fatness is Blackness.
Well, yeah. And Sabrina Strings talks about that in the book Fearing the Black Body, the Racial Origins of Fatphobia. And I think it also has to do with religion. So here's a quote from the book. The legacy of Protestant moralism and race science as it related to fat and thin persons loomed large. Indeed, many early to mid 20th century physicians relied on moral and racial logics to rail against persons deemed too fat or too thin. But over time, a growing number did so specifically and exclusively to condemn fatness.
We were talking about different cultures and especially different times appreciating a rounder body. For 400 years, between 1500 and 1900, bigger bodies for both men and women had a strong appeal. And you can see this in painting, you can see it in sculpture.
Well, it's a bunch of naked fat ladies.
There's been times when I've been in an art museum looking at a sculpture that is exactly my body type and saying, someone likes us.
The Rubens did.
For 400 years, the fat body was the desirable body between 1500 and 1900. It wasn't until the 1920s, really, that thinness became equated more with wealth. We had post-industrial revolution, and rich people found that they did not have to do any labor outside the home, any physical labor. You didn't have to go outside. And so being pale and thin started to be a good thing. And also finding that because labor had moved from being exclusively out in the fields to indoors after the Industrial Revolution, poor people weren't tan anymore. So it became fashionable to not just be very thin, but to be very tan.
It became associated with travel.
Right. Travel, outdoor sports, tennis, the realm of every rich person. And so suddenly what was attractive had to turn on a dime. We've got corsets that made a body very curvaceous, very busty and tiny waist and big hips. And then in the flapper era, we were dealing with that stick straight body, that teenage boy body. Fatness is also a racial problem. The Black body has always been bigger, and the distaste for that is racially motivated. 80% of Black women are considered obese on a BMI chart. So distaste for fatness is also a distaste for people of color.
I have a quote with that, again from Sabrina String. Stoutness, corpulence, and surplusage of flesh are never desirable except among African savages. This raises several questions. First, what led some well-to-do Americans to believe that slenderness, especially among women, was both aesthetically preferable and a sign of national identity? How did fatness become a sign of immorality? How did fatness become linked with Blackness and Africanity?
I do think that the choreographer, George Balanchine, was responsible for the super thin beauty ideal. He was born in 1904 in St. Petersburg, so he was operating in the early 20th century in America. And before the 20th century, ballet dancers were round women, dancers were round women because women were round women. But Balanchine was the first choreographer and ballet director who really thought that the reed thin, tiny, tiny, tiny ballerina was the ideal. And then
Did he ever explain why?
He just liked it better.
Just like the shape better?
Yeah.
The idea of a fat ballerina, that's comedy, right? Can you imagine a fat woman who's also a ballerina?
I have.
Drinking Mexican beer?
Laura's referring to a project I was booked for by the cinematographer Chivo, where they were talking about absurdities, things that didn't go together. So I was a fat ballerina and I got paid $1,000.
Nice.
Fat ballerinas, or at least round ballerinas, used to be the norm. And this one man's eye and aesthetic took over at the same time as fatness was increasingly associated with poverty and not with wealth. And then ballerinas have had eating disorders, many of them, ever since.
So speaking of poverty and fatness, this is another quote from Fearing the Black. Racial discourse was deployed by elite Europeans and white Americans to create social distinctions between themselves and fat racial others. Black people, as well as so-called degraded or hybrid whites, e.g. Celtic Irish, Southern Italian, and Russians, were primary targets of these arguments. How does that feel?
Hybrid whites.
How does it feel to be two kinds of hybrid white?
Amazing. So let's talk about the medical field a little bit. We've been told over and over again that we're in an obesity epidemic, that obesity is the second biggest killer of Americans after alcohol. But in fact, being mildly obese, being a little bit higher on the BMI actually makes you less likely to die than being very thin.
Being an older, chubby woman is better for your heart and body than being thin.
And unfortunately, the thing that's very worse for your heart and body is yo-yoing between two extremes, which in an environment of fat phobia, we all do because everybody is trying to achieve and maintain this ideal.
Exhibit A, Mama Cass. I mean, that's why she died, because her body had been so destroyed by extreme dieting and yo-yoing and all of those things.
Amy Winehouse died. It's purported to be alcoholism, but anorexia nervosa and bulimia were definitely a factor.
What doctors were saying is if she hadn't had an eating disorder, she would have survived. Yeah. She could have handled it, but her body just couldn't process alcohol very well anymore because of the ED.
So despite the fact that obesity itself, that you can be a healthy overweight person, whether or not you exercise is much more a factor in whether you're healthy than how big your body is. But doctors are some of the most fat phobic people in the world. And every fat woman has stories. We see all these stories on TikTok of women coming in with broken legs and cancer and being told, well, the first thing you should try to do is lose some weight.
I literally saw a TikTok just this morning where one was talking about how she is permanently disabled now. She cannot feel her foot because she went to 6 different doctors who all told her it's not the fact that you have compressed things in your spine. Mm-hmm. It's just that you're fat.
Primary care physicians overstate the effects of being overweight on all-cause mortality. So have painted with a broad brush the effects of being overweight on health, describing being overweight is much more detrimental than clinical guidelines actually indicate. A national survey of the United States found that individuals who are overweight reported 3 times higher likelihood to be denied medical care. And in the UK, where healthcare is free, 25 out of 91 primary care trusts have bans for the treatment of obese individuals. We're not going to waste our money on treating you if you're not going to take care of your fat problem.
Well, it's because being fat is a moral choice.
Yeah, people would rather be dead than fat, which ties in nicely to eating disorders because you really could die trying to get the body that is going to get you treated better in society.
You often do.
Yeah. Let's talk about fat dating a little bit.
Dating while fat?
Mm-hmm. One, there's a study that 89% of fat people have been bullied by romantic partners. So almost everyone.
Well, I remember when I was much less fat than I am today, a friend was wanting to date me. And I found out much later that he had written a song with another friend who was also my friend. And the song was called Chunky Attractive Girl. And it was about me.
But they said you were attractive.
Well, you have to say that because if she's chunky, she can't be attractive. So we have to spell it out. Yeah.
I definitely had experiences where the attitude was, if I'm fat and trying to date, I'm there to have sex with. I went on a date with a guy who I thought was very cute. Not the smartest guy. You can't have everything. And at the end of the date, he said, you should come home with me because I love effing fat girls.
Wow. That's quite a compliment.
And I said, thank you.
Well, the thing that I noticed as my weight excelled,
as your weight became even more of what it was before,
as my weight became more robust, I found that men that I used to be cohort with, people who I definitely would have dated in my 20s, were just not even swiping on me at all.
A lot of people who were freshly out of prison or about to go to prison,
ruthless and toothless, 95 years old. I mean, I was getting hits.
Super hot. Super hot.
They were not hot, but I was getting attention. But it was mostly from men that I would never in my wildest imaginings even consider for a relationship ever. And when I would find a guy who was evenly matched with me, similarly attractive, similar age, similar education level, etc., they were just trying to have casual sex with me.
So that's fun.
After my weight loss, I was like, oh, okay. Now all the guys that I used to be able to get, they're coming back around. Where have you guys been for the last 5 years?
When I've experienced that, seeing my stock rise dramatically after losing weight, I regard it with disgust.
Because I think, well, I don't want to date you now.
If I wasn't good enough 20 pounds ago, you're not good enough now.
It has made me really look at a lot of men with disdain. Just totally grossed out by all of it.
So I read this on anti-fat bias. There was a study trying to figure out how to resolve anti-fat bias. When told an individual was obese because of overeating and lack of exercise, a higher implicit bias was found among study participants than those not provided with context. So when you were told specifically, this person is fat because they've been mistreating their body, people thought lesser of them. When the group was told that genetics was to blame, they did not exhibit a lowered implicit bias. So when people were told this person is fat because they have a disease, or this person is fat because they were born to be fat, it doesn't matter why you're fat.
Because again, it is a moral failing thanks to the Protestants. So it's about being plain, simple, not eating too much, not having sex, not being interested in any of the 7 deadly sins. If you're not following those guidelines, then you are a morally inferior person.
The last thing I'll leave us with is, in a world where we are seeing more people of color, more people across gender stereotypes in film and television, and you think, oh, maybe bias is getting better. Fatness is maybe the last frontier where you can really, really dislike a group for something that they cannot necessarily control. And that anti-fat bias has been on the rise every year since 1995. So it's just getting better and better.
Did you ever see that Jack Black movie?
The movie where he's attracted to a woman because he thinks she's thin.
Dude, you're fat. What are you doing here? You would only date this woman because you think she looks like an eating disordered Gwyneth Paltrow. Yeah, shallow Hal. I mean, the whole thing is like, oh, he's so shallow. But we're not acting like that's that bad.
And the whole joke is he sees her as being this thin person, but her real body is breaking things.
She can barely fit into clothes. And he's talking to her father about how beautiful she is. And he's like, oh, thanks for lying. Ugh. It's horrible.
And that's your boyfriend. So, Laura, after this super cheerful episode on a topic that we've thought and talked a lot about, what are your final thoughts about fat phobia and American fatness?
I have mixed feelings about all of it, really. Obviously, I've been living it for most of my life. But what I've tried to do with my life is not get super obsessive about my body. I don't know if you know my mother. She used to have these AIDS candies.
Right.
And they were dieting AIDS. Yeah, it was what was it? AYDS?
AYDS. Famously a brand that stopped existing after the AIDS health
AIDS epidemic. Somehow they fell out of favor. But she used to eat these little caramels that would, I guess they were appetite suppressants, and just spent most of her life destroying herself trying to be thin. And she wasn't even fat. Right. That's the dumb part. I guess for me, my goal was just to bulk against that and try to do everything I could to not be in that category. It still sucks. I am at my most fat at this moment.
Congratulations.
Yes. I did get an award. They had to deliver it to me, but I did receive it. It's on my mantle. But it's starting to be to the point where I'm having a hard time fitting in furniture and fitting into the world anymore. And I just think to myself, I'm pretty chubbed out, but I'm not more chubbed out than 60 to 70% of the American population. Why is it like this?
And it's like this because the people who are designing airplanes, couches, even automobiles and other transportation, they're not thinking about you. They're not thinking badly about you.
They're thinking about a white, thin ideal that really isn't much of the American population anymore.
It doesn't actually reflect us.
So, Virginia, in closing, what are your final thoughts on this topic?
It's a charged topic. And I read a thing where 90% of American women say they're trying to lose some weight. 90%.
That makes me so sad.
It's incredibly sad. I think it's an incredibly dumb thing to spend your time and energy on. You get to the end of your life. What have you achieved? Well, I managed to eat under 1,200 calories.
Every day.
Every day in adulthood. It does make me very sad.
So what's the solve?
I think the solve is truly working on liking yourself, every single one of us. If you truly like yourself and accept your body and love your body and find great things about your body and great things you can do, that's how we get out of it.
I listened to a podcast with Aubrey Gordon called Maintenance Phase. And what she talks about is getting to a place where it's neutral, where you just feel neutral. I have a lot of thoughts about my fatness and my body and what do other people think, yada, yada. They don't have a charge anymore. So they're just rolling through my head, but I don't feel them.
There's not a value judgment on it.
Right. It's just like, oh, I'm fat. Yes. Just like I'm short or I have green eyes or I am a hybrid Italian / Irish person.
My friend Jenny Zagrino has a great joke that mirrors my thoughts a lot. You're not allowed to call yourself fat. if you say I'm fat, people say, oh, no, you're beautiful.
Right,
And she's like,
fat
yeah,
is not an insult. It is just a descriptive adjective.
Yes. But in her joke, she goes, well, I'm fat. And people go, no, you're not fat. You're beautiful. She's like, I never said I wasn't beautiful.
I just happened to be fat as well. Yeah. So, Virginia, if people want to find you on the internet, how do they do it?
If you want to find my fat butt on the internet, you can check out www.bidinia.com or my TikTok at Bidinia and my Instagram at Bidinia. I did want to give a shout out. We had an episode about stalking, and someone I mentioned in the episode wrote me that they liked it, but then a couple days later, they didn't like it anymore. Okay.
You're going to find that often happens, but hopefully they'll change their mind again.
Laura, where can people find you on the internet?
Well, if you want to find me on TikTok, write me and say, go on a diet, USC Laura. And I am Laura Ryan on TikTok. You can also find my website, lauraryan.org. And if you want to reach out to the show, you can email us at hello@mysistersatherapist.com. You can also get on our Instagram, mysistersatherapist.com, or our website, mysistersatherapist.com. There's Bidinias everywhere. And there's mysistersatherapist.com everywhere. If you want to hire us for your bar mitzvah, your Target opening,
pool party,
anything related to Target, if you want
charity event,
if you want to have a Target related charity event, please email us at hireuss@mysistersatherapist.com.
Laura, this is the part of the show where sometimes you will read a review that someone has sent us. Do you have one to share this week?
Yeah, I actually do. We have a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts.
Thank you.
Also, if you guys want to write your 5-star reviews, I will read them, and then you'll be famous, just like yours truly, Gen X. And yours truly, Gen X, said, best cure for the Monday blues. My sister's a therapist is required listening for my weekly work commute. Virginia and Laura's witty banter is the perfect antidote for the Monday blues. The topics are always interesting, but what keeps me coming back week after week are the laugh out loud, knee-slapping zingers these two drop each episode. The people in the car next to me want to know what I'm listening to. Thank you, yours truly, Gen X. I really appreciate that.
From two Gen Xers to another, big thumbs up.
2 big thumbs.
Big thumbs.
Big foam thumbs.
And in closing, we would like to remind all of our listeners of the immortal words of Billy Ray Valentine, Capricorn, when he said, we could make it, baby.
Me and you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.